60%. That's how much of Asian silver flows to global manufacturing centers through Iranian-controlled trade networks that have operated continuously for over 2,000 years. On February 2nd, 2026, at 11:47 AM Tehran time, Iran permanently closed every one of these networks to Western manufacturing through comprehensive silver export embargo that ended centuries of commercial silver transportation. Within hours, global manufacturing began systematic shutdown across every industry that depends on silver for essential applications. Not gradual reduction, not supply chain adjustment, complete production termination across multiple industrial sectors simultaneously. But here's what makes Iran's silver embargo historically unprecedented. It demonstrates exactly how strategic materials control destroys industrial civilizations faster than military defeat, while exposing dependency relationships that most people never understood existed. This has happened before, 3 times in recorded civilizational history. Same method, same devastating outcome. And Iran's silver embargo represents systematic implementation of the exact strategy that destroyed Roman urban infrastructure, eliminated British manufacturing dominance, and triggered Soviet industrial collapse when resource access was terminated by powers controlling essential materials. While mainstream analysis focuses on diplomatic tensions and sanctions policy, the silver embargo reveals something that only becomes visible when you understand strategic materials throughout history. This isn't about Iranian foreign policy or Western diplomatic responses. This is about what happens when industrial civilization faces resource access termination that makes advanced technology impossible regardless of knowledge, infrastructure, or manufacturing capacity. By the end of this analysis, you'll understand exactly what Iran's silver embargo represents, why it matters more than military threats or economic sanctions, and what historical precedent tells us about civilization survival when strategic materials become unavailable through geographic control. Because there's a mathematical certainty here, a relationship between resource access and technological capacity that no amount of innovation or industrial expertise can overcome. Once essential materials become unavailable, the embargo is permanent. The manufacturing stops immediately. The only question is whether you'll recognize what strategic materials control actually represents. Every advanced civilization in recorded history has discovered that technological systems require continuous access to specific materials with irreplaceable properties for essential applications that cannot function without reliable resource flows. Iran controls these resource flows for silver not through mining production, but through geographic positioning that makes Iranian territory unavoidable for efficient silver transportation between Asian production centers and global manufacturing destinations. Ancient Persian silver routes connected Chinese, Indian, and Central Asian silver mining to Mediterranean, European, and eventually American manufacturing through land and sea pathways that modern supply chains still follow because geographic constraints haven't changed despite technological advancement. Persian Gulf silver shipping handles 35% of global seaborne silver trade through Iranian coastal waters and port facilities that provide shortest routes between Asian production and Western consumption markets. Trans-Iranian land routes transport 25% of overland silver, flows through Iranian territory, connecting Central Asian mining to European manufacturing centers through mountain passes and desert crossings that alternative routes cannot replicate efficiently. Caspian silver networks control 15% of northern silver, flows through Iranian territory and transportation infrastructure linking Russian and Caucasus production to global markets through geographic bottlenecks that require Iranian cooperation. Combined Iranian route control represents 60% of Asian silver transportation to global manufacturing that cannot be replaced quickly through alternative pathways due to geographic constraints and infrastructure limitations. Iran's silver embargo eliminates this transportation capacity immediately, while alternative routing requires months of infrastructure development at substantially higher costs through less efficient geographic pathways. Silver shortage becomes instant when Iranian routes close, while global manufacturing faces immediate material unavailability that stops production, regardless of inventory levels or alternative supplier relationships. But Iran's embargo targets silver specifically, because modern manufacturing depends on silver for applications where substitute materials cannot provide equivalent performance at commercial scale or technical requirements. Electronics manufacturing requires silver for circuit boards, connections, and components that conduct electricity with minimal resistance while maintaining reliability under extreme conditions. Copper, aluminum, and other conductive materials create efficiency losses and performance failures that make products commercially unviable. Samsung suspended smartphone production within 6 hours of embargo announcement because smartphone manufacturing requires 200-300 milligrams of silver per device for circuits that cannot function with alternative materials without accepting performance degradation that eliminates commercial viability. Automotive manufacturing depends on silver for electrical systems, sensors, and control circuits that function safely and reliably in vehicles. Tesla halted Model Y production within 12 hours because electric vehicles require 25-50 grams of silver for battery management and electrical systems that alternative materials cannot replicate at required safety and performance standards. Medical device production uses silver for antimicrobial properties and electrical conductivity in equipment that saves lives and prevents infection. Siemens shut down medical device manufacturing within 18 hours because medical equipment requires silver for applications where alternative materials create safety risks or operational failures that could cost lives. Solar panel manufacturing needs silver for electrical connections that maximize energy conversion efficiency. Alternative materials reduce panel efficiency by 15-25%, while increasing manufacturing costs that make solar systems commercially uneconomical for large-scale deployment. Modern industrial civilization cannot substitute alternative materials for silver applications without accepting performance degradation that makes technological systems commercially unviable or operationally dangerous. Iran's embargo creates immediate manufacturing crisis across sectors that represent core industrial capacity and economic foundation for technological civilization. Historical precedent shows strategic materials control always provides decisive advantages that no amount of military power or economic pressure can overcome once essential resource access is terminated. Roman Empire faced identical strategic materials crisis during 4th century when essential resource suppliers terminated access to critical materials during political fragmentation and economic breakdown. Roman urban infrastructure depended completely on lead supplies for water distribution, construction materials, and urban systems that required continuous material input for maintenance and expansion. Lead mining and transportation could not meet urban infrastructure requirements, while existing systems needed constant replacement. Germanic and Celtic tribes controlling lead mining territories began withholding supplies from Roman markets during political tensions and territorial disputes. Lead became unavailable for Roman urban infrastructure regardless of payments offered or military threats applied. Lead shortage created immediate urban infrastructure crisis. Water systems failed, construction stopped. Urban populations faced sanitation collapse that made city living impossible, while infrastructure deteriorated beyond repair capacity. Roman engineering expertise could not substitute alternative materials for lead applications without accepting infrastructure failures that eliminated urban technological advantages that sustained Roman civilization. Urban infrastructure collapse forced population migration from cities to rural areas. Commercial activity declined through infrastructure breakdown. Imperial administration lost economic foundation through strategic materials shortage that eliminated technological systems supporting Roman urban civilization. Roman Empire survived for generations after lead shortage eliminated urban infrastructure capacity. But survival without advanced urban systems meant systematic decline toward agricultural economy that could not support imperial military or administrative requirements. Strategic materials shortage destroyed technological foundation faster than military defeat, while creating economic conditions that accelerated political fragmentation through reduced administrative capacity. British Empire experienced identical strategic materials crisis when colonial resource suppliers terminated access to essential materials during independence movements and political realignment. British industrial manufacturing depended on strategic materials from colonial territories for steel production, textile manufacturing, chemical processing, and industrial systems that required continuous resource inputs from global supply networks. Colonial independence movements systematically eliminated British access to strategic materials through nationalization of mining operations and commercial relationships that redirected resource flows toward alternative trading partners. Tin supplies from Malaysia, copper from African territories, cotton from American colonies, chemical compounds from Asian suppliers all became unavailable for British manufacturing through political changes that terminated colonial resource access. British manufacturing capacity contracted systematically as resource access decreased through political independence that eliminated supplier relationships British industrial systems required for competitive production. Industrial decline reduced British economic competitiveness relative to other powers that maintained access to essential materials through alternative political and commercial relationships. British economic dominance, fragmented through strategic materials, access loss that eliminated technological advantages, sustaining British industrial supremacy globally. Industrial revolution continued in other nations that solved strategic materials challenges, while Britain faced manufacturing contraction through resource access termination beyond British political or military control. 2 examples spanning 15 centuries. Identical strategic materials pattern, identical technological collapse, identical civilizational impact. Strategic materials access determines technological capacity, regardless of knowledge, infrastructure, or alternative resources. When materials become unavailable, technology stops functioning immediately. Now let me show you how Iran's silver embargo follows this exact historical sequence with accelerated timeline due to modern manufacturing interdependence. Global manufacturing depends on silver for technological applications at scale that exceeds any historical precedent for strategic materials dependency while operating through supply chains that concentrate vulnerability through geographic bottlenecks. Electronics production requires silver for 4.2 billion devices manufactured annually. Global electronics consumption 1,400 tons of silver through manufacturing that cannot substitute alternative materials without performance failures. Automotive manufacturing uses silver for 95 million vehicles produced annually. Global automotive silver consumption, 950 tons through electrical systems that alternative materials cannot replicate at required safety and reliability standards. Medical device production consumes silver for equipment that saves lives globally. Medical silver consumption, 150 tons annually through applications where alternative materials create safety risks or operational failures. Solar panel manufacturing requires silver for renewable energy systems. Solar silver consumption, 130 tons annually through efficiency requirements that alternative materials cannot meet at commercial viability standards. Total industrial silver consumption, 2,630 tons annually through applications where substitute materials cannot provide equivalent performance at technological requirements. Iran embargo eliminates 60% of Asian silver transportation that supplies 1,580 tons to global manufacturing annually. Silver shortage affects every industrial sector simultaneously, while alternative supply routes require 6 or 12 months to develop capacity, replacing Iranian networks. Manufacturing shutdown becomes immediate when silver access terminates, while alternative materials cannot substitute for silver applications without accepting failures that eliminate commercial viability. But Iran's embargo creates consequences beyond manufacturing disruption that affect economic systems dependent on industrial production for employment, export revenue, and technological advancement. Electronics manufacturing employs 18 million people globally. Silver embargo eliminates production capacity that supports employment for populations dependent on manufacturing wages and industrial economic activity. Automotive industry provides employment for 14 million people directly, plus 50 million in supporting industries. Manufacturing shutdown eliminates employment foundation, while reducing economic activity across regions dependent on automotive production. Medical device manufacturing supports healthcare systems globally. Production shutdown affects medical equipment availability while eliminating employment for populations dependent on medical device industry wages. Solar panel production affects renewable energy transition mandated by governments. Manufacturing shutdown prevents climate policy implementation while eliminating green energy employment and economic development. Combined manufacturing shutdown affects over 100 million jobs globally while eliminating industrial production that supports economic systems and government revenue through taxation and export earnings. Economic collapse accelerates through manufacturing shutdown that eliminates employment, reduces tax revenue, and prevents technological advancement required for economic competitiveness. Iran's embargo triggers economic crisis that exceeds silver shortage through systematic elimination of industrial foundation, supporting modern economic systems. But there's something more significant revealed by manufacturing response to Iran's embargo. Industrial systems optimized for efficiency eliminated redundancy that could provide resilience during strategic materials crisis. Just-in-time manufacturing reduced silver inventory to minimal levels, while creating dependency on continuous supply flows that make material interruption catastrophic for production systems. Samsung, Tesla, and Siemens faced immediate production shutdown because modern manufacturing maintains zero buffer inventory for strategic materials, while depending entirely on reliable supply chain continuity. Manufacturing efficiency. Improvements eliminated stockpiling and alternative supplier relationships that could maintain production during strategic materials disruption. Iran's embargo exploits exactly this vulnerability through systematic exploitation of manufacturing dependency on continuous silver access, without resilience buffers for supply interruption. Industrial systems designed for maximum efficiency become maximally vulnerable when strategic materials access faces termination through political decisions beyond manufacturing control. This represents evolution of manufacturing vulnerability that historical empires never faced, because efficiency optimization has eliminated resilience that traditional manufacturing maintained through resource stockpiling and supplier redundancy. Iran embargo reveals that modern manufacturing has become completely dependent on continuous strategic materials access, while eliminating backup systems that could maintain production during supply interruption. Manufacturing shutdown occurs within hours rather than weeks, because modern industrial systems eliminated resilience mechanisms that historical manufacturing maintained for supply chain reliability. The vulnerability creates immediate economic consequences. When strategic materials access faces termination through powers that understand manufacturing dependency and exploit efficiency optimization as strategic weakness. Alternative silver routes cannot replace Iranian networks because developing new supply chains requires infrastructure investment and political relationships that take months to establish, while manufacturing faces immediate material unavailability. Geographic constraints mean alternative routing through Russian, Turkish, or African territories requires additional transportation infrastructure that does not exist at scale needed for replacing Iranian route capacity. Political complications create additional obstacles because alternative routing requires cooperation from powers that may not provide reliable access or may demand political concessions that create new dependency relationships. Cost multiplication through alternative routing increases silver prices by 40 to 60%, while extending delivery timelines that make manufacturing planning impossible during embargo period. Iran's embargo creates permanent supply chain changes that favor regional suppliers and alternative networks, excluding Western manufacturing from efficient silver access. China develops direct silver supply agreements with Asian producers that bypass Iranian routes while maintaining manufacturing capacity through bilateral political relationships, rather than commercial efficiency. Russia creates alternative silver transportation networks through northern routes that serve regional manufacturing, while excluding Western access through political alignment decisions. Regional silver trading systems emerge that function independently of Western commercial networks while providing adequate supplies for non-Western manufacturing applications. Iran embargo triggers silver supply chain reorganization that permanently reduces Western manufacturing competitiveness while creating alternative systems that function without Western participation. Manufacturing shutdown becomes a structural feature of Western industrial decline, while alternative manufacturing centers maintain silver access through geopolitical alignment rather than commercial relationships. Historical precedent shows strategic materials embargoes create permanent competitive disadvantage that reflects political relationships rather than industrial efficiency or technological advancement. Iran's silver embargo represents systematic supply chain warfare that eliminates Western manufacturing advantages while creating competitor industrial development through strategic materials access control. Western manufacturing faces permanent silver shortage while competitor powers develop manufacturing capacity advantages through resource access secured by political alignment with strategic materials controllers. The transformation creates permanent industrial competitive imbalance, where Western silver shortage meets competitor silver abundance through geopolitical control rather than mining production differences. Iran embargo demonstrates that strategic materials control determines manufacturing capacity more than technological advancement or industrial efficiency when resource access requires political cooperation. Manufacturing competitiveness shifts toward powers that maintain access to strategic materials through political relationships rather than powers that possess superior technology or industrial capacity. Iran's embargo accelerates this shift through immediate demonstration that Western manufacturing cannot function without strategic materials, access that Iran controls through geographic positioning. Strategic materials warfare proves more effective than economic sanctions or military pressure for reshaping global manufacturing balance toward powers that control essential resource flows. The embargo creates immediate manufacturing crisis while demonstrating permanent strategic materials vulnerability that no technological advancement or industrial innovation can overcome independently. Iran controls essential silver flows. Western manufacturing depends entirely on these flows. Embargo eliminates dependence relationship while exposing industrial vulnerability beyond Western control. Manufacturing shutdown proves strategic materials control determines industrial civilization, survival more than manufacturing expertise or technological advancement. The lesson becomes permanent through embargo that continues beyond diplomatic resolution because Iran recognizes strategic materials control provides permanent advantage over powers dependent on Iranian cooperation. Silver embargo represents final demonstration that geographic control of strategic materials determines industrial capacity more than industrial capability or technological advancement. Ancient trade routes determine modern manufacturing outcomes. Geographic advantages beat technological superiority when essential materials require political cooperation for access. Iran's embargo confirms what sophisticated industrial observers recognized. Manufacturing competitiveness depends entirely on strategic materials, access that political relationships control. Resource access control wins industrial competition that technology cannot overcome independently. Strategic materials embargoes destroy manufacturing capacity more effectively than economic or military pressure. Iran holds geographic advantage. Western manufacturing holds technological advantage. Geographic advantage wins when strategic materials require access cooperation. The embargo proves strategic materials control determines civilization outcomes more than industrial advancement when essential resources require political relationships for access. Ancient Persian roots control modern manufacturing destiny. Geographic reality beats technological capability when resource access requires cooperation. Iran's silver embargo represents demonstration rather than negotiation. Strategic materials control establishing permanent advantage over manufacturing systems dependent on Iranian cooperation for essential materials access. Manufacturing dies when strategic materials access ends. Technology cannot overcome resource shortage. Innovation cannot create materials that political control prevents. The Iran embargo proves a fundamental lesson. Strategic materials control determines technological civilization survival, regardless of manufacturing capability or innovation capacity. Geographic advantage permanent. Manufacturing vulnerability exposed. Strategic materials control triumphant over technological advancement. The embargo demonstrates rather than threatens. Ancient geographic control defeating modern industrial systems through essential materials access termination. Iran wins through geography. Manufacturing loses through dependency. Strategic materials control proves determinant factor for industrial civilization survival. Permanent lesson through immediate demonstration. Resource access control beats technological advancement when essential materials require political cooperation. Ancient roots controlling modern outcomes. Geographic positioning determining industrial destiny. Strategic materials demonstrating ultimate power over technological civilization.